Talmud Bavli, Tractate Beitzah, page 7b, top of the page, continuing from the idea of they're asking anytime there's a male with it, a rooster, with a chicken, they were asking if maybe these eggs were fertilized by eggs that they were fertilized. They were just eggs that came from the ground. Not sure what that means, but they weren't fertilized by the male. I don't know how that's possible, but that's what they're saying here. Anyway, they're asking like how close does a male have to be considered that it's nearby, and the answer given was that close enough that the chicken can hear the rooster's voice by day. I'm not sure that, but how if it makes a difference day or night, but that's what it says. Okay, continuing on with the words Avad Rav Mari, top of 7b, Zion and Beis. The Gemara relates Rav Mari took action in accordance with this opinion when he found an egg on a festival morning after he had looked in the nest the day before and failed to find an egg there. He examined up to a distance of 60 houses from the chicken, and although he did not find the rooster within this area, he assumed there was one further away and permitted the egg. Oh, okay. The Gemara comments, and if there is a river between the rooster and the chicken does not cross the river, but if there is a bridge, it crosses the river. And if there is only a rope bridge suspended across the river, the chicken will not cross the rope. The Gemara comments, nevertheless, an incident occurred in which a chicken crossed over on a rope bridge. However, one may not rely on this possibility. The Gemara further asks, in what manner did you establish this halacha of Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul, who prohibits eating an egg discovered in a nest on a festival morning after the previous day's examination revealed nothing? You said that it is referring to a case in which the chicken absorbed from the earth. If so, why discuss specifically a situation in which one examined the nest the evening before? The same halacha should apply even when one did not examine the nest beforehand. The Gemara answers, in a case where he did not examine the nest, one could say that the egg was laid yesterday, and there is no reason to prohibit its use. Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul therefore specified that he checked the day before and is certain that the egg was not laid prior to the festival. The Gemara challenges this. If so, when he examined the nest as well, say perhaps this is a case in which most of the egg emerged and returned, and the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara answers, the case discussed by Rabbi Yochanan, where most of the egg emerged from the chicken and returned, is uncommon, and therefore it is assumed not to have occurred. Apropos one statement of Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul in the name of Rav, the Gemara cites another ruling that Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul said that Rav said, this crushed garlic poses a danger of exposure. If mashed garlic is not properly covered, there's a concern that a snake might have tasted from it and thereby injected its venom into the food. This garlic is consequently prohibited as a health risk. The Mishnah states, the Beis Shammai say, the measure that determines liability for leaven is in olive bulk. However, the measure for leavened bread is greater, a large date bulk. According to Beit Hillel, the measure in both cases is in olive bulk. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for the opinion of Beis Shammai? The Gemara explains, if it is so, that the measures are equal, that the merciful one write only the prohibition of leavened bread, and it would not be necessary to write leaven. And I would say, and not for to your inference, a kal v'chomer, if the measure that determines liability for leavened bread, whose leaven is not as extensive, is in olive bulk, then leaven, whose leavening is extensive, all the more so should be the measure that determines liability by the olive bulk. If so, why do I need the explicit reference to leaven that the merciful one wrote in the verse, 7 days there shall be no leaven found in your houses. Exodus 12:19. It must be to tell you that the measure of this leavened bread is not equal to the measure of that leaven. Rather, the measure that it determines liability for leaven is smaller. The Gemara asks, and Beit Hillel maintained that both the mention of both leaven and leavened bread are necessary. As if the merciful one had written only leaven, I would have said its measure that determines liability is an olive bulk because its leavening is extensive. However, with regard to leavened bread, whose leavening is not extensive, say no. That is not the measure. Therefore, it is necessary to mention leavened bread as well. And conversely, if the merciful one had written only leavened bread, I would have said that the measure that determines liability for leavened bread is an olive bulk because it is fit for consumption on its own. However, leaven, which is not fit for consumption on its own, but only when used as a leavening agent for dough, say no. Its measure is not like that of leavened bread. Therefore, it is necessary to mention both cases. The Gemara asks, and Beit Shammai, don't they hold in accordance with Rabbi Zera's opinion? As Rabbi Zera said, the verse states, 7 days there shall be no leaven found in your houses. For whoever eats that which is leavened, and that soul shall be cut off from the assembly of Israel. Exodus 12:19. The verse begins with leaven and ends with leavened bread to say that leaven is equivalent to leavened bread. How then can Beit Shammai maintain that the two are prohibited by different measures? The Gemara answers, we might have to do a part 2 on this one. Indeed, with regard to the measure that determines liability for eating, everyone agrees that the same measure applies to leavened bread and leaven. When they disagree, it is with regard to removal of leavened bread from one's house. Beit Shammai hold that we do not derive the halacha of removal from that of eating. Rather, with regard to the obligation of removal, different measures apply to leavened bread and leaven. And Beit Hillel hold that we derive the halacha of removal from the measure that determines liability for eating. The Gemara comments, this idea was also stated explicitly by Amoraim. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said the dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel was stated with regard to the removal of leavened bread. However, with regard to the measure that determines liability for eating, everyone agrees that the measure for both this and that is an olive bulk. That opinion is also taught in a Beitzah. The verse states, and no leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leaven shall be found in all your borders. Exodus 13:7. This obligation to remove leavened bread is subject to a dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. As Beit Shammai say, the measure that determines liability for removal of leaven is an olive bulk, and the measure for leavened bread is a large date bulk. And Beit Hillel say, the measure for both this and that is an olive bulk. The Beitzah indicates that the dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel is with regard to the obligation to remove leavened bread, not liability for eating it. I believe we should probably, due to time, continue with part B. Yes. Part 2, that is. 7b, part 2. Okay.